Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about my Week 14 waiver wire targets for the 2023 fantasy football season. Over the course of today's episode, I'm going to be talking about players at a variety of different positions. The best available running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks, kickers, and defenses. Players that are not only going to help you in Week 14, considering there are two teams on bye, the Washington Commanders and Arizona Cardinals, but of course, players that are going to help you deal with the injuries that we were all impacted with in Week 14. So these players hopefully will help you this week and beyond in order to help us capture a 2023 fantasy football championship, because that's the entire point, as we're all trying to achieve that singular goal. Before we get into today's video, a couple reminders. There are timestamps down in the description of the video if you're looking for a specific player. While you're down there, if you've yet to do so already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We're making daily fantasy football content for the entirety of the 2023 season, and we are very close to achieving a goal of 82,000 subscribers. Thank you very much for all the support. Also, at the end of today's video, after I talk about all of the waiver wire prospects that you could potentially pick up going into Week 14, I'll be putting together a couple pick'em subs via Underdog Fantasy. If you guys travel down to the description of the video and check out Underdog Fantasy, signing up today using code Andrew and making that first time deposit minimum of $10, not only are you going to get the first time deposit match up to $100, but you'll get my rankings sent to you every single Sunday for the remainder of the season. These rankings consist of by position, by tier, flex rankings, half PPR, full PPR. These rankings will also be sent out on Saturday of Week 15 and 16, because there's 3 Saturday games in Week 15 and 2 Saturday games in Week 16. So all of that will be taken care of. Be sure to take advantage of the opportunity today by checking out the map to the right side of the screen to determine your eligibility using code Andrew. And of course, if you do so before tonight's game between the Jacksonville Jaguars and Cincinnati Bengals, you could take advantage of 0.5 total yards from Trevor Lawrence in an advantageous matchup, to say the very least. Thank you very much. Okay, let's talk about some waiver wire targets for Week 14, beginning with the running back position. As you guys can see to the right side of the screen, we begin with our number one, Ezekiel Elliott. Obviously, the injury that was sustained by Ramondre Stevenson yesterday was extremely unfortunate. He was, poised for a huge game against the Los Angeles Chargers. After only playing 16 snaps, he exited the game with what is assumed to be a high ankle sprain. So considering the New England Patriots play on Thursday against the Pittsburgh Steelers, the assumption is that Ramondre Stevenson will not be ready for that game. Not only that, with the assumption that this is a high ankle sprain, that could lead to potentially 3-4 weeks missed. That could remove him for the entire rest of the fantasy football season, weeks 14 through 17. So for those of you who have Ezekiel Elliott available in your leagues on Yahoo Fantasy, he's only rostered in 40% of leagues, and on Sleeper, he's only rostered in 46% of leagues. He's coming off a performance in which he had 17 rushing attempts for 52 rushing yards, 5 targets, 4 receptions, 40 receiving yards, and 11.2 fantasy points against the Los Angeles Chargers yesterday. I absolutely understand that the New England Patriots offense is the worst in the National Football League, but there is still value to be had at the running back position in regards to Ezekiel Elliott for the remainder of the season, being the starting running back of this team, if in fact Ramondre Stevenson's injury is going to hold him out for that span of time. The number 2 that I wanted to talk about is Kenneth Gainwell. Again, another one of these handcuff running backs that we have to have on roster. I talked about it last week, and this conversation continues in terms of getting the backups to your blue chip running backs for the remainder of the season, so that when you get to weeks 15 through 17, you're not scrambling on waiver wire Monday in order to pick up their backup. Kenneth Gainwell's only rostered in 27% of Yahoo leagues and 28% of Sleeper leagues. In yesterday's game, DeAndre Swift obviously left the game early and went to the locker room due to an injury. It is undisclosed as to what that injury was, but even prior to the injury that he sustained, he was being outsnapped by Kenneth Gainwell. That's the first time that this has happened since week 1. Going all the way back then. So if Gainwell is going to get himself more utilization, if DeAndre Swift is dealing with an injury, going up against the Dallas Cowboys this week isn't the most advantageous matchup. But if in fact he's going to be the starting running back of his team, assuming DeAndre Swift is going to miss any semblance of time, of course, Kenneth Gainwell, an automatic start going into the week. Our number 3 is Tyjae Spears. Yesterday, throughout the game against the Indianapolis Colts, Derrick Henry obviously started out strong, scored himself 2 touchdowns, was an unstoppable fantasy force, but then was exited out of the game due to a potential concussion. He was sent into the protocol. Obviously, Tyjae Spears, in the absence of Derrick Henry, 16 carries for 75 yards, 6 targets, 4 receptions, 13 receiving yards, 10.8 fantasy points, and a half PPR scoring format. Earlier this morning, Mike Vrabel, the head coach of the Tennessee Titans, did come out and say, and he confirmed that Derrick Henry is not in concussion protocol. They tested him last night, and they also tested him earlier this morning, and he should be good to go for week 14. But that kind of a scare in terms of an injury for Derrick Henry, of course, considering how much value there is within this backfield, you want to make sure that you have your backup to your blue chip running back in the form of Derrick Henry. As of right now, Tyjae Spears rostered in 35% of Yahoo leagues, 45% of sleeper leagues, and he's averaging 4.98 yards per carry. So if at any moment he needs to be the starting running back of this team, we all know he's capable of doing so. The number 4 is Ty Chandler. Ty Chandler is coming off of the bye week under the assumption that many people in your league may have dropped him because of last week's bye-apocalypse of 6 teams missing. Ty Chandler may be available. They do take on the Las Vegas Raiders. We know that this matchup is top tier in its own. A top 5 matchup since week 5 in terms of allowing fantasy points to opposing running backs in terms of rushing statistics isolated. That's rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. On top of it, the Vikings are going to feature both Madison and Chandler pretty evenly going forward, so he obviously has an opportunity to put up pretty big performances, especially in an advantageous matchup. Our number 5 is Roschon Johnson, another one of these players that could have been dropped potentially because of the bye week. Roschon Johnson's only rostered in 21% of Yahoo leagues, 32% of sleeper leagues, very similar numbers to Ty Chandler. And if in fact Deontay Foreman is going to once again miss time considering his shin/ankle injury, there may be an opportunity for Roschon Johnson to continue to get himself a high volume of carries. The last time we saw him out against the Minnesota Vikings, 15 total touches, 10 on the ground, 5 through the air, 10.0 total fantasy points, and a half PPR scoring format. Of course, a valuable option. The final player I wanted to mention is DeeJay Dallas. I know that they take on the San Francisco 49ers this week, but the last time we saw the Seattle Seahawks, of course, Kenneth Walker was on the sideline, of course, still injured with that abdomen injury. If he is not to return, and Zach Charbonnet last time out against the Dallas Cowboys left that game early with an injury himself, if both those running backs are not available, DeeJay Dallas would be the man up for this backfield as the primary starter. Let's move on to the wide receiver position, beginning with our number 1, Elijah Moore, someone who I had as my number 1 last week, and he continues to be in this conversation. He's currently only rostered in 43% of Yahoo leagues. My assumption is that he could be available in your league, and he's coming off a performance in which, obviously because of the absence of Amari Cooper early in that game, even though he was finding himself production, unfortunately sustained a concussion. After Amari Cooper's concussion, a lot of targets went in the direction of Elijah Moore. He accumulated 12 total targets, only 4 receptions for 83 receiving yards. Still a solid performance at 10 fantasy points, and going forward, with Joe Flacco looking as good as he did yesterday against the Los Angeles Rams, even though the result of the game in terms of the loss wasn't what they were looking for, Joe Flacco was certainly the quarterback and veteran presence this offense needs. And going forward, of course, with the rapport that he's already built with Elijah Moore and the assumption that Amari Cooper could end up missing this upcoming week because of the concussion protocol, again, Elijah Moore, a fantastic play going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 14. On number 2, Noah Brown. Of course, when I talked about injuries earlier today, it was in regards to guys like Ramondre Stevenson, but also Tank Dell. Unfortunately, Tank Dell sustained a season-ending injury, fractured his fibula. It's extremely unfortunate, especially considering how well he's been playing as of late and the way that this offense has been trending over the course of the last month with Tank Dell. Now, in the return yesterday, Noah Brown was relatively quiet in terms of his overall production, but going forward, besides Nico Collins being the number 1, Noah Brown's going to have to step up as that number 2, and we have seen him on multiple occasions this season go for over 150 receiving yards when healthy. So going forward, a wide receiver who's only rostered in 40% of Yahoo leagues, 49% of sleeper leagues, and he's going to be filling in for Tank Dell, should be a value going forward. I know that this week he takes on the Jets, but nonetheless will be a value. Our number 3 is Demario Douglas. If in case someone dropped him because he was in the concussion protocol and they didn't have an IR spot available, this is a player that is only rostered in 26% of Yahoo leagues, 37% of sleeper leagues. Demario Douglas is the number 1 receiving option of the New England Patriots offense, regardless of who's going to be the quarterback, whether it's Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi, Will Grier. It does not matter. Demario Douglas is going to continue to get himself a high volume of overall opportunities. Half PPR, full PPR will be the most potential for his value, especially considering the ability for this team to score a touchdown, very uncommon in comparison to the high volume of passing attempts in which they'll continue to have to commit to, considering they're going to be in negative game scripts for the majority of the season. If he clears concussion protocol prior to Thursday's game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, a solid top 40 wide receiver option. Our number 4 for this week, Josh Palmer. Josh Palmer is one of these wide receivers that is coming off of the injured reserve. If in fact they're able to activate him, let's just put this in perspective. In the last 4 games in which Josh Palmer played prior to his injury, half PPR fantasy points, 12.6, 9.2, 8.0, 15.8. He is a great contributor, and of course this offense desperately needs a number 2 receiving option, considering the running game has been inept, the offensive line play has not been great at all, and Justin Herbert is just trying to survive with, of course, Keenan Allen dealing with his own fair share of injuries, considering how much volume they've given him as of late. This offense desperately needs another relieving option, and of course Joshua Palmer can absolutely provide that in his return. Only rostered in 29% of Yahoo leagues, 36% of sleeper leagues. If he's not already on your injured reserve, he could potentially be picked up and utilized for the upcoming games. Moving on to Odell Beckham Jr. on number 5. Odell Beckham Jr. takes on the Los Angeles Rams, his former team. Again, if someone dropped him throughout the Bipocalypse, again, he's already rostered in 39% of Yahoo, 50% of Sleeper. I would assume no one really dropped him, considering over the course of the last, 4 games, he's had himself 10 plus fantasy points in 3 of those games. My assumption is that he's probably on roster, but if in fact someone dropped him, this offense is going to continue to have to find other receiving options outside of a Zay Flowers in the absence of Mark Andrews going forward. On number 6, we have Jonathan Mingo. I think that the Adam Thielen experience is over. It lasted a very long time, and it was very fruitful for us for fantasy purposes, but Adam Thielen has been very quiet as of late. Yesterday against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Jonathan Mingo led the team in terms of total targets, 10 targets. It was a season and career high for him. 6 receptions, 69 receiving yards, 9.9 fantasy points. I'm assuming with the new, coaching regime and based on where this offense is trending, I'm assuming they're going to want to utilize as many young players as possible in order to give them, a little bit of rapport with Bryce Young, especially before they get into year 2. So Jonathan Mingo will be featured more often going forward. Only rostered in 6% of Yahoo leagues, 17% of sleeper leagues. I want to mention 3 more players for those of you who play in super deep leagues. Number 7, Jalin Hyatt, another one of these options that could be of value. Again, last time we saw him out, 5 receptions, 109 receiving yards with Tommy DeVito as a starting quarterback, 13.2 fantasy points, could be a value going forward. Their number 8 I wanted to mention is Dontayvion Wicks. If in fact Christian Watts's hamstring injury that he sustained late in yesterday's game is going to hold him out for any semblance of time, Dontayvion Wicks could absolutely be a value. He's been a huge contributor within this offense over the course of the last month already. So if in fact Christian Watson's not out there and he could be a starter on the field in a lot of their 11 personnel sets, absolutely should be someone that you can keep an eye on, potentially, if you're in need of a wide receiver. Alec Pierce is the final player I wanted to mention. Since the bye week in the last 2 games, he has seen 6 targets in each of those games. More opportunity means more potential for fantasy points. Obviously scored himself a huge touchdown early in that game and was able to get himself 3 catches, 100 yards, and a receiving touchdown, 17.5 fantasy points. Again, if they're going to continue to give him opportunity, could be a value. Let's move on to talking about some tight ends and quarterbacks. Beginning with our number 1 at the tight end position, we have Isaiah Likely. Again, if in fact somebody dropped him because of the Bipocalypse, be sure to scoop him back up. Again, he takes on the Los Angeles Rams this week. The Los Angeles Rams have given up a lot of points to opposing tight ends thus far this season. As of late, 8 catches, 72 and a touchdown to Cleveland tight ends. 8 catches for 86 Arizona tight ends. 4 catches, 58 and a touchdown Green Bay tight ends. 5 catches, 60 and a touchdown Dallas tight ends. Everyone has dominated against this defense. I would expect Isaiah Likely to continue that trend. Brevin Jordan's another tight end that I wanted to mention. Obviously, was one of the top 12 players that we had in yesterday's live stream prior to, of course, kickoff. Every Sunday morning, 7 to 10 a.m. Be sure to swing on by. He had himself 7.9 fantasy points. If, in fact, Dalton Schultz is going to continue to miss time, and also, of course, there is no Tank Dell, there may be even more opportunity going into this week's matchup against the New York Jets for someone like Brevin Jordan to step up. The final player at the tight end position that I wanted to mention that is on screen right now is Zach Ertz. He is currently a free agent. He was obviously granted and was released from the Arizona Cardinals early last week. If, in fact, he signs with the team, as long as he gets a full week of practice, I would trust that he can immediately come in and make a difference for fantasy purposes, especially considering there's not much depth at the tight end position. So if in fact we're in a situation where he gets signed to a team this week, I would honestly consider him as a potential option that you could pick up. But considering we don't know if he's going to sign now or in 2 weeks, we'll have to wait and see how that transpires. If in fact we're going to replace him with someone that you can utilize this week, Harrison Bryant with Joe Flacco obviously overshadowed the overall contributions of David Njoku. Harrison Bryant, 5 targets, 5 catches, 49 yards, and a touchdown, 13.4 fantasy points. This team loves to utilize tight ends. And of course, Harrison Bryant, primarily a blocking tight end, but got himself a touchdown in each of the last 2 games, rostered in 0% of Yahoo and sleeper leagues. Not really a surprise there, but could be a value. Now, the 3 quarterbacks that you can see on the bottom of the screen, these are players that if in fact they're somehow available, please pick them up. But I would assume that they are already rostered. Now, if in fact nobody had picked up Geno Smith prior to the Thursday game against the Dallas Cowboys, considering he was not on a great trend of overall performances as of late, of course, there's a potential that he could be available. Same with Josh Dobbs, could have been dropped because of the Bipocalypse. And many people may have thought the Matthew Stafford performance of 4 touchdowns against the Arizona Cardinals was a fluke, but he has 7 passing touchdowns in the last 2 games. I know he takes on Baltimore this week, but for the fantasy playoffs, weeks 15 through 17 could be a value for fantasy purposes. But let's talk about some players that are more widely available. Gardner Minshew, currently rostered in only 23% of Yahoo leagues, 27% of sleeper leagues. He's coming off a performance of 312 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 18 plus fantasy points. Fantastic performance. Currently, the Indianapolis Colts are a 7-5 football team. They are trending towards potentially making the playoffs. and maybe getting themselves a home game. You never know. There's always the possibility of that. Their upcoming schedule for the fantasy football season: Cincinnati, fantastic. Pittsburgh, we'll take it. Atlanta, great. Las Vegas. The opposing quarterbacks he's taking on: Jake Browning, Mitchell Trubisky, Desmond Ridder, Aiden O'Connell. I think that Gardner Minshew can beat these quarterbacks, beat these defenses, and put up great performances. Obviously was able to get himself a touchdown yesterday in overtime, but nonetheless, a fantastic option. Joe Flacco had himself a ridiculous comeback yesterday. 16 points, 250 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. Currently only rostered in 5% of Yahoo leagues, 7% of sleeper leagues. He was my starting quarterback in my home league in a super flex format as my number 2. Obviously, I most recently lost, Joe Burrow in that league, and now Kenny Pickett, but nonetheless, Joe Flacco, again, could be a value going forward considering their upcoming schedule. This is a 7-6 football team. They're trending toward trying to make the playoffs. Their upcoming schedule: Jacksonville, Chicago, Houston, New York Jets. They can win 3 of those games potentially. It's just up to whether or not Jeff Flacco is going to be able to elevate the team in that direction. The final quarterback I wanted to mention is famous Jameis Winston, eating W's like crab legs. Currently, this team is 5-7. And my assumption is that they still have a chance to still make the playoffs in comparison to the Atlanta Falcons and, of course, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which are in their division. If Jameis Winston is going to be the starting quarterback going forward, considering Derek Carr has not been able to get the job done, is also not healthy, they have the Carolina Panthers, New York Giants, LA Rams, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 4 games that are absolutely winnable for this organization. Jameis Winston could end up elevating them there if, in fact, Derek Carr is going to be absent. And if, in fact, Jameis Winston catches on fire, wins himself a couple games here in the absence of Derek Carr, it would be his job to keep going forward. Okay, let's talk about some kickers and defenses to close out today's waiver wire pickups. We begin with our number 1, Cairo Santos. In the last 3 games prior to the bye week, 12, 17, and 14 fantasy points. He has scored 11 field goals in the last 3 games. He takes on the Detroit Lions this week. Fantastic matchup. Moving on to our number 2, we have Kaimi Fairbairn. He is coming off of the injured reserve. The last time we obviously saw him, got injured in the game. Prior to that injury, his fantasy points for his first 6 games of the season: 9, 8, 13, 12, 15, and 8. He's going to have himself a lot of potential for fantasy value going forward in his return from the injured reserve. The final kicker I wanted to mention, we have Greg Joseph. Greg Joseph, since week 5, prior to the bye week, averaging 8.9 fantasy points per game in the last 8 games he has played. Again, if in fact someone dropped him because of the bye-apocalypse, could be a value taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. Let's talk about defenses. These are 3 defenses that I not only like this week, but for the remainder of the season. The Indianapolis Colts only rostered in 31% of Yahoo leagues, 30% of sleeper leagues. They take on the Cincinnati Bengals in week 14. In the last 4 games, the Indianapolis Colts defense have put up 26, 16, 11, and 18 fantasy points. Not only that, they take on Jake Browning, Mitchell Trubisky, Desmond Ridder, and Aiden O'Connell in the next 4 games. All backup quarterbacks, which grants me a lot of confidence in terms of starting this defense for the remainder of the season. A lot of potential on hand here for the Indianapolis Colts defense. Moving on to the Texans, currently rostered in 13% of leagues on Yahoo, 9% on Sleeper. Their upcoming schedule in terms of quarterbacks that they play aren't great. This week they take on Tim Boyle. Unless they're going to switch to Zach Wilson, we'll have to wait and see. Either way, Texans should be able to put up a great number against this New York Jets offense. So not only taking on the New York Jets this week, they take on Will Levis and the Titans the week after, Joe Flacco and the Cleveland Browns the week after that, and then once again Will Levis. If this defense can lock down the Titans in 2 of those 3 fantasy playoff games, of course, should be a value. The final defense I wanted to mention, the Green Bay Packers, 18% on Yahoo, 13% on Sleeper. They take on the New York Giants this week. So besides taking on Tommy DeVito this week, their upcoming schedule looks like, DeVito, Mayfield, Bryce Young, and Josh Dobbs could be a value in that circumstance going forward, but not only this week. Okay, that's going to cover it in terms of waiver wire targets going into week 14 of the 2023 fantasy football season. Thank you everybody for watching. Let's go ahead and conclude today's episode by putting together a couple pick'em subs via Underdog Fantasy. Be sure to check out the link down in the description, not only to potentially get my rankings for the remainder of the season every single Sunday, and of course the Saturdays in which there are games, weeks 15 and 16, but you can also go ahead, put together some pick'em subs, draft some teams, not only for the remainder of this season, but also once we get into the NFL playoffs. There's a lot of best ball contests that you can take advantage of and have a lot of fun with. So let's check that out right now. So as for today, I don't really trust anyone on the Cincinnati Bengals. I honestly don't. When I went ahead and I looked at this list, I looked at all the numbers that were, coming through with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I was like, I'm pretty confident in these numbers. Like, I like the idea of Travis Etienne scoring a rushing touchdown. Like, I like the idea of someone like Calvin Ridley surpassing 6.5 targets. He's been able to accomplish this, if I'm not mistaken, in every game except for one, as long as Zay Jones has been active. One being just this last week in which he only had 6 targets. I'm willing to take this opportunity number in this circumstance. I like the idea of someone like Evan Ingram being able to surpass 48.5 receiving yards, taking on a matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals, who have been awful against opposing tight ends. There's a lot of potential within these 3 plays. I like all 3 of them, but in order to put together a pick'em slip, you need to have a player on the opposite side. Now, these are the 3 plays that I like, and I'm probably going to go ahead and put a couple of them together alongside of one player from the Cincinnati Bengals. As to who, I've looked at a couple players. The first one I looked at was Logan Wilson. His current number is 8.5 total tackles/assists. In 5 of the last 7 games he has played, he's been able to surpass this number. It's not the greatest overall statistic, but again, one that you could take advantage of. I don't really love these Cincinnati Bengals players today. I just don't trust it very much. In comparison, I would like to hope and assume that Ja'Marr Chase should be able to get himself 6 receptions. I'd like to hope that that is the case, especially considering this is the guy that has said on multiple occasions, I'm always effing open. And if you want to go ahead and help this quarterback, allow this quarterback to throw the ball short distances in the direction of Ja'Marr Chase. Prioritize Ja'Marr Chase similar to the way that they did. If you go back to week 3 against the LA Rams, when Joe Burrow was hurt, couldn't leave the pocket, they were still able to get Ja'Marr Chase the ball 10 plus times. I don't see why they can't do that with Jake Browning. Get the ball in his direction, screen passes, a high volume of receptions going into today's game. I would hope that the possibility is there and that they're going to continue to send the ball in their most talented receiver's direction, especially within this matchup. But as of right now, if I'm going to put together a pick'em slip, I honestly don't want to touch any of these Bengals players. The only thing that I'm willing to suggest is probably Travis Etienne anytime touchdown and Calvin Ridley going higher on his targets. Those are the 2 plays that I love the most. I'll be putting together a couple sprinkles here and there on other plays, but those are the 2 that I like. Be sure to check out Underdog Fantasy. Take advantage of the opportunity on hand. Tomorrow I'll be back with running back rankings at a top 36 capacity for week 14. Thank you everybody for watching. If you have not yet already, subscribe, click the like button down below, comment down below. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.